I've been evaluating Bronny James since he was a freshman in high school, and now he's finally entering the NBA draft. This is Floor and Ceiling, let's break him down. For me, the idea of Bronny James has always revolved around him being a secondary or tertiary playmaker who can space the floor, reliably make quick decisions, and use his athleticism and vision to come up with two-way plays. Ultimately, I really don't think that his archetype is that far away from prospects like Reed Shepherd, Jared McCain, or even Devin Carter to a smaller extent. Make no bones about it, the production clearly lagged far behind for Bronny this season. He averaged 5 points, 3 rebounds, and 2 assists per game while shooting about 27% from 3. However, let's remember that he suffered cardiac arrest during preseason last July, which led to an atypical ramp-up for a college freshman to say the least. On top of that, like I mentioned in my Isaiah Collier video, and as was also the case with Kobe Johnson, USC was just not a great context this past season. James will definitely need more patience and development, and he is rawer than either of those 3 other guard prospects. But I genuinely believe that the chances of Bronny returning first-round value in the future are very real if things go well. I was higher on him than most in preseason, having him in my top 10 after being a McDonald's All-American and rising into a 5-star prospect. That was a little steep, but I would still feel good about having him in my preseason top 20. And looking ahead, I remain higher on James than the consensus since I would feel good about picking him in the top 30 come the end of June. The USC prospect has steadily improved throughout his career, and I think this will be really apparent with his 3-point shooting in the NBA. James had a down season for sure, making slightly below 27% of his shots from downtown. However, I think that ultimately, James will be able to convert threes in the high 30s while also shooting a high volume. Bronny has a nice, compact stroke, which looks very repeatable, and he flashed making higher difficulty threes. Down the line, I think he'll be able to make shots off movement or in transition fairly consistently. He did more of this in high school with Sierra Canyon and in the summer travel circuit, so I'm honestly buying those looks a little bit more after having evaluated James in person over a variety of contexts for years now. I'm not saying that Bronny is going to come into the NBA and immediately shoot 37% from 3, but I steadily maintain that he is much better than his sub 30% from 3 in college. At the end of the day, it's indisputable though that his production as a freshman at USC was not good. In the long term, I'm not worried about the percentage from 3. Some of these misses are very makeable, and like I said, I think James will be fine, but I am looking for him to speed up his shot a little bit. Towards the end of his sole season in college, I thought he lost a little bit of confidence in his jumper, especially when his playing time started to wane. Things seemed fine by the NBA draft combine though, so I think it's more so that he was in a slump after a tough season more than anything mechanical. Looking down the road, these threes are gonna have to go in for Bronny because like I said, he's a connective prospect rather than a lead guard. He needs to be able to complement every type of primary initiator at any position by at least spacing the floor and forcing defenses to rotate if he has a good look from 3. Throughout his entire basketball journey, a recurring theme for James has been the need to be assertive. We'll get into what that means off the dribble, but if there's one thing Bronny cannot lose, it's being aggressive from 3. For James to hit both his safest and highest NBA outcomes, I really think that he'll need to take and make a lot of threes. All along, I've kept that he will develop into a good shooter, but of course, it's a big leap to the NBA, and evaluators will have questions about his marks from college. When Bronny is knocking down his threes, he can definitely make decisions off the catch. This right here is important for literally every NBA prospect nowadays, but even more so for connective ones. The reason for that is that the whole idea is that they need to leverage the attention that their star teammate generates in order to create advantages for the team. Broadly, I like the process that I've seen from Bronny, but the production, again, is low. The ball never sticks in his hands, sometimes even to a fault, and he profiles down the line as one of those 0.5 guys who can catch and drive, catch and pass, or catch and shoot. Looking at the league right now, some guards who Bronny could have a similar role to include Davion Mitchell, Josh Green, Quentin Grimes, or in a very high case outcome, a lower volume version of Lonzo Ball on the Pelicans. Until now, Bronny has shown some solid flashes, but I definitely want to see him get more from his athleticism, especially as a finisher. James is a pretty good positional athlete who is strong and long, but he needs to play more physical in the paint. At this juncture, he profiles pretty well in transition, and we saw as much as a freshman, but this is not really the case against a set defense which dates back to high school. This is not as obvious when James is attacking with space in front of him, largely in transition, but in the half court, James only took 11 shots at the rim as a freshman, making 6 of them. That is incredibly low volume, which reflects across the board. Overall, for his freshman season, James made 16 of his 26 attempted shots at the basket. The conversion is okay, but evidently it's not what I'm focusing on. Bronny needs to get to the rim way more, which starts by improving his handle and getting deeper paint touches on his drives to maximize his athleticism. He also needs to continue diversifying his finishing package, which I touched on in high school as well. James is in the process of adding a floater to his game, but it's still inconsistent, and he can be slightly predictable, wanting to go left at times. The Trojans prospect likes to flip shots in with a scoop, but I think he can get more from his finishing above the rim. Bronny is a little under 6'3" in shoes, so finishing against NBA length and size will be a learning curve. Again, the tools and flashes exist, which is important to highlight, but the production and the quantity was lacking. Given that Bronny will usually play off the ball anyways, maybe you can mitigate that for now by using him as a cutter. James is a good athlete who can move with intent, and he's better moving towards the basket in space, like I said. But really, you don't see too many NBA teams use 6'2" guards in this way. And if they do, it tends to be more so as a screener rather than as a cutter. Really, Bronny's biggest improvement point, and this has consistently been the case for him, is self-creation. Part of this is somewhat contextual because it also depends on what role you see James fulfilling. I see him as an off-ball, third guard, connector type, never as a primary, so this is less limiting. However, if you're a team who doesn't care for that type of player, already has that role filled, or prefers greater on-ball juice from a guard, this is definitely more problematic for Bronny. His handle is not reactive or creative in tight spaces, and he doesn't break down defenders one-on-one. USC did not allow for the best context, but as I said, this has been the case for James in terms of creating separation even before college. Looking ahead, Bronny's handle still needs growth because he can only consistently go in a straight line. I'm also hoping to see more flashes as a pull-up shooter because this would give James a much higher ceiling compared to a lower role player floor. To Bronny's credit, I actually thought he did show improvement and a path forward with this during his short freshman season. His numbers as a pull-up shooter were honestly encouraging, but they've somehow gone under the radar despite the coverage that Bronny generates. James cashed in on 44% of his jumpers off the dribble, which would be considered excellent. Yet, once more, this came on a really low sample size of just 32 total attempts, which averaged out to a little more than 1 a night. Like I've insisted, I think Bronny's shot and touch is there or will be there, but the separation is not because he needs a screen pretty much every single time. Still, James has flashed being able to make those quick trigger pull-up threes immediately after using a pick. Those, I believe, speak to his shooting potential, and he can also rise into an elbow jumper, but that's more so about him being potentially a good scorer rather than crafty with the ball. Bronny's balance stands out to me because he almost always rises into his shot the exact same way whether he shoots off the catch or off the bounce. However, there is reason to wonder why James's jumper doesn't go in more despite looking pretty good. Bronny obviously struggled from 3 this season, and it is very important for him to maintain gravity from the perimeter. His role, at least early on, should feature the need to make plenty of catch and shoots. But despite my optimism here, and even my belief that James can eventually extend into movement 3s and shots of that nature, it's also true that Bronny only made under 20% of his stationary 3s as a freshman. Diving into James's passing, this is where he really pops as a connective prospect. Overall, I believe that he thinks the game at a high level and he'll be able to make quick, correct decisions. We'll get into this, but Bronny's playmaking is more useful in the open court or scramble type situations than it is against a set half-court defense right now. When James is decisive, he is generally accurate with his deliveries using one or both hands. Similar to Isaiah Collier, USC's system was so rigid that I believe he'll be better with more freedom and pace. But also, I find that Bronny's passing probably best fits a team who plays pretty fast, rather than slowing things down in the half court. So regarding those rumored Lakers or Suns fits, I would have some initial doubts about the short-term nature there. Bronny's playmaking is not necessarily flashy, but I think he's very steady at recognizing when defenders fall asleep, overhelp, or are in the wrong position. Specifically, I like how the Trojans prospect created plenty of looks from 3 this season. He's a smart, low-volume ball mover who keeps his teammates involved and doesn't let the rock stick. Of course, it's very valid and likely correct to believe that James's connective passing would be more valuable at closer to 6'6" rather than 6'2". But at least for the next while, I do think that Bronny will be a functional, fast decision maker off the catch, rather than someone who organizes his team in the half court. Through that, some of his limitations, I think, can be hidden, but this also probably means that the amount of context that James can succeed in might be more restricted. For instance, and this is key, he is still unproven in the half court in the pick and roll, which will need improvement for a 6'2" guard. Bronny isn't capable of constantly creating advantages, his handle is not dynamic, so he doesn't turn the corner as much as he should despite his athleticism and first step. James has to get more out of ball screens going forward, and getting better at playing at different speeds would really help him out. Broadly, I think that Bronny makes the right reads, but his execution is up and down against set defenses because he doesn't always let plays develop deeply enough. All of this broadly ties into his turnovers as well. Those are more as a result of his improvement areas as a ball handler and self-creator rather than James making poor reads, in my opinion. Looking ahead, he will need to fix this in order to put the ball on the floor for longer times, legitimately manipulate defenses, and generally to get his shots off at the rim and off the dribble more effectively. I'm pretty high on Bronny James defensively, although probably a bit more off the ball than on the ball right now. James measured in pretty well, I thought, at the draft combine. I expected him to be between 6'2" and 6'3" in shoes, and then his wingspan, a little over 6'7", was nice to see. That's alright, not amazing positionally, but I have fewer defensive concerns with Bronny's size than Reed Shepherd or Jared McCain's because he projects as a stronger, more explosive athlete. As I said, James's work off the ball can be impressive. He can read plays ahead of time and anticipate passes before coming up with a deflection or a steal. In fact, Bronny's first step might actually be more functional on this end right now. With the ball in his hands, his handle can limit him a bit, but that's no longer an issue if he's pursuing the ball. At USC, James averaged slightly less than 1 steal per game, but I thought he was fairly disruptive overall when he was engaged. and I think this reflects a little bit more as a high school senior at Sierra Canyon when he posted nearly 2 steals a night. Bronny's biggest improvement area away from the ball probably relates to his aggression and positioning. James can be guilty of overhelping at times, and he doesn't have as much margin for error at his size. Like other 19-year-olds, he's also prone to gambling from time to time to try to get a steal, but I don't think that's a big problem because he genuinely does have the tools to create defensive events. Getting into James's defense on the ball, we've seen real flashes to buy into. Again, James is tenacious and pesky. He relishes competing on this end of the floor, which has been trademarked throughout his career in terms of making multiple efforts and having a great motor, but this sort of went unnoticed until later on in his freshman season. I'm not sure how switchy James is really going to be at his size. There are legit questions about that. He plays tough, but his arms only extend so far if he's up against 6'7" wings. However, I do think he can develop into a very annoying defender at the point of attack, similar to a Davion Mitchell or Patrick Beverley type in that sense. Still, development will need to take place here as well. None of this is surprising given the developmental stage that Bronny is at, but James can still be overly physical sometimes, and he doesn't always maximize his athleticism. I understand that I'll be in the minority here, but I'm still high on Bronny James, and I'm very reluctant to sell my stock in him. After evaluating Bronny in person over multiple years, I remain interested in the idea of him as a connective, scalable playmaker with high-level athleticism, real defensive instincts, and genuine shooting flashes to go along with reliable decision-making. Bronny still finds it a real struggle to create separation, to get to his spots, and the production will really need to go up. James, in general, needs to assert himself way more. But genuinely, I believe that he can ultimately return first-round value. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a comment telling me what you think of Bronny James, and if you enjoyed the channel, if you want to watch more content like this, make sure to subscribe. Take care, and I'll catch you guys next time.